this week for Goodbye PlayStation 3 is gonna be Sports Week. And what better way than kick off Sports Week than a big fuck you to the YouTube order. Now, I have a shitload to talk about this week because I have all kinds of topics to discuss when it comes to my sports games. You know, from the individual sports, to the realism in video games, to EA Sports and 2K, to the differences between PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3, to eventually PlayStation 4 versions of the games, and yes, you could throw the Xbox console trilogy in that motherfucker. But obviously, my personal experience comes from PlayStation consoles. And we're kicking the week off with NCAA 2008, a confused hot mess of a game that pretty much summed up the issue most of the earlier sports games had with this console generation. You know, it's no secret, EA and 2K, they struggled heavily with the first few years of their sports franchises on the outgoing console generation. Both of them even admitted recently that their earliest games on PlayStation 3 and the 360 were underwhelming, and part of that was that they felt unprepared for the new console generation. And as PlayStation 4 and Xbox One rolled out, both companies were very open in stating that they made big mistakes at the start of the older generation, but both assuming PlayStation 2 technology would be enough to carry them over to the succeeding generation. As for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, they were determined not to make that same mistake again and have promised us that things will be different than these next few sports games that are coming out. And while that remains to be seen, at least they acknowledge that their games had some serious issues at the start of last generation. Case in point, NCAA 2008. By the end of PlayStation 2's life cycle, EA had a pretty good NCAA franchise going. Their engines ran smooth, their games looked similar enough to Madden to pass a graphic test. Outside, of course, of Madden using real-life players and NCAA using generic faces, NCAA 2004 through 2007 were some better installments of the game, with the exception of the Xbox 360 version of NCAA 2007, which EA basically screwed over. Even they'll admit, they fucked over that game pretty badly. So anyway, when PlayStation 3 rolled out, as a gamer, you had to assume that the power of the new consoles would lead to some amazing games, right? I mean, more power equals more shit that you could put into a game. Well, not exactly. EA must have been caught completely by surprise by the specs of the consoles, because it's the only way I can explain how off NCAA 2008 feels. I mean, I have no other rational explanation other than the programmers and developers and the team that worked on NCAA had no fucking clue what they were doing. You know, it's hard enough during the transition years where teams are working on current gen games and new generation games. You know, that's more platforms that you need to be concerned with. So you can understand when there are some errors that go across generational games. EA made the decision at the time to make NCAA 2008 feel like it was a major difference in the console versions of the game. The PlayStation 2 and the Xbox OG. You know, fuck, I don't have a name for their first console anymore. Seriously, what the fuck do you refer to that shit as right now? Xbox Original? Xbox Uno? Yeah, whatever, man. The older console version of NCAA 08 was basically a copy and paste of NCAA 2007. You know, a few tweaks, a few upgrades, but overall, the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox Uno version of the game was the same exact thing. Same engine, same graphics, same playbook, same animations, everything. PlayStation 3 and 360 versions were complete makeover versions of the Xbox 360's version copy of 2007. Everything was brand new. New interface, new engine, new motion capture, stadiums, uniforms. Nothing from the prior generation was ported over. And ultimately, it felt like nothing was even remotely close to being ported over. The older generation actually had a playable game. They had a familiar game, albeit it was a copy and paste from the prior game. The newer consoles had this monstrosity, which for some reason made players all shiny and shit. I mean, no, seriously, look. Just look at the Michigan uniforms in the background. Look at their shiny as shit yellow pants. Doesn't that shit look like vinyl or fucking pleather? I mean, look. What fucking athletes play in uniforms as shiny like this? Nobody plays like this shit. Other than maybe those new chrome helmets and shit, no team is this absurdly shiny. Looks weren't alone where this game faltered, man. The playbook was changed to something back in the fucking Stone Age. Really? 4 box plays on a screen, you had to move the highlighter around to select that shit? Come on, man. I had that shit in fucking Nintendo games, motherfucker. The animations were horrible. Everything from the quarterback throwing motions being the same for each pass to people running like they have a shit stuck in their pleather ass pants. I mean, the fastest player in the game, he had his feet move at the exact same speed as the slowest player in the game. Except the fastest player floated around the field much quicker, man. The body portions of the players were absolutely horrible. There is barely any differentiation from a wide receiver to a linebacker with a 30-pound weight difference. Even the presentation of this game is horrible. There's no opening segments of the game. It just brings you straight to a coin toss. There's no team-type celebrations or customized fans. There is nothing that differentiates one school from another other than their uniform and their band fight song. The Florida Gators do not rub the alligator for good luck. The Boomer Sooner doesn't come onto the field. The War Eagle doesn't fly across Auburn. Nothing. Teams that had alternate uniforms didn't have that in the game. The only thing you had was a home and away jersey. So no alternate jerseys. Shit, there aren't even any fucking referees in this game. Look at the field. Not a single fucking rep. And speaking of the fields, they didn't even have every stadium in the game. I believe in the 2007 version on Xbox 360, they only had something like 40 fucking fields. But now in this version, they almost had 100. So at least that is improved, but that still wasn't every single stadium in the game. There's still about 20 stadiums short up in this motherfucker. And each stadium still needed some massive amount of detail that were missing up in this motherfucker. The Dynasty mode was straight up plain vanilla. Yes, they wanted something different than the older generation, but this was a stripped down portion of bullshit. You know, recruiting was all kinds of terrible. That timer shit for calling recruits was all fucked up, man. There was no rhyme or reason why recruits would choose your school over others. You just had to go with the flow up in this motherfucker. Now look, I get it. It's a new console generation. Mistakes were bound to happen, but when you divert from a formula that worked in a prior game, you had better make sure your shit is on point. Clearly, that didn't happen in this case. And NCAA 2008 wasn't the only game that suffered from this. Madden, FIFA, NBA 2K, NHL, all the sports franchises ran into the same exact issue. So I don't want to make it seem like this is just one game. No. It was the whole genre that suffered from this. And what makes this even more strange is that both sports games developers have 1 full year on the Xbox 360 version of the game. Remember, Xbox 360 rolled out 1 full year before PlayStation 3 ever came out. So they didn't even get their shit together for Xbox, let alone PlayStation 3. Now obviously the 360 version was a lot better than the PlayStation 3 version, but you would figure with at least 1 year's jump, 1 year head start, even the Xbox version would have shit on it. Nope, they were both horrible on both consoles. The older generation didn't change anything at all, but players were familiar with it and they accepted it. The new generation changed everything, and players hated it because it was broken. Clearly, this was the wrong approach that EA took to the game. And on a side note, I must commend EA for learning their lesson from those early games, because this console generation, it was much different. It was a much more improved gameplay process. They made a huge leap in the generation gap this time around for their first series of sports games, so at least that was an improvement over what they did 8 years ago. I'm not saying the games are better, I'm just saying they recognized their flaws that they had when the 360 and PlayStation 3 consoles came out around that time. However, this game was the victim of shitty planning and shitty execution. The game was so shitty, in fact, it led me to my decision to buy the game that I'll be posting up tomorrow, in which I'll be talking about that decision I personally made. Now, looking back on this game and playing it for a while getting this footage and shit, oh man, I remember all the issues this game had. All the bugs that never went fixed, which I'm going to talk about in a future video when it comes to patches. It was a mistake from pretty much every end imaginable, and really, it was an unplayable game at points when you realize that the programming was just so fucked up. EA knew it was a piece of shit, and they tried and didn't succeed, but tried to make it better over the years, and I'm going to have my chances to talk about that this week on all these videos. But for this version of the franchise, it was collateral damage. A helpless and undeserving victim of the console generation switches years ago, and basically, it was an unplayable game after just one Dynasty season. As much as I wanted to love NCAA 2008, the game never stood a chance. EA was completely unprepared for the new console generation, and this game shows just how unprepared that they really were. Anyways, we have a long week ahead of us when it comes to Sports Week, because I have 4 more videos to go, and tomorrow's video is the one that I alluded to last week as the most important game in my entire process of buying video games. So you guys are certainly going to want to watch that video, as you guys will see the reason for why that game changed my entire gaming library. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.